in terms of the stuff that you could have in your content arsenal around a single release, it could be, the demo. It could be an acoustic version of the song. It could be early access to the track in and of itself. And I know some artists are afraid to do that kind of thing. But I promise you, like, if you do give certain subsets of your fan base early access, they're going to stream it anyway. When it comes out and you let them know, they're going to listen to it.
You are now listening to the Creative Juice podcast, brought to you by Entrepreneur.io.
What's up, indies? Welcome back to the Creative Juice podcast. This is episode 227. I'm your host, Jack McCarthy. With me is my co-host, Mr. Ed Isola. Ed, what's up, dude? Are you excited to dive into all things releasing music today? Because I am.
I am, yes. And thank you for the nice segue. I feel like normally you go like, how are you doing today? And I'm like, I'm good. I'm excited for the episode. So you got me right into it. But yes, I am excited. And I think it'll be really cool because there's some stuff that we're going to go through that I think a lot of people have questions around in terms of singles and releasing singles and strategies and stuff like that. And so it'll be cool to kind of outline this and hopefully give you guys some actionable tips when it comes to releasing singles.
Yeah, this is a question that we get a lot when it comes to the show and when it comes to music marketing, both from our listeners and from the Indie Pro community, is like, what's the best way to release a single? What do I need to make sure that I do? What are, the non-negotiables if I'm going to be releasing singles every month or every 2 weeks or every 2 months or whatever it might be? And I think those are really good questions. There's a lot to it, and there's a lot of things that you can do. And to be totally honest, I don't know if you'll agree with me on this or not, Ed, but I don't think that there's like a bulletproof single release strategy that I would necessarily recommend for each and every artist out there, especially knowing that, different artists have different fan bases, different size fan bases. Their release cadence might be different. So I don't necessarily believe or ascribe to the belief that there is a perfect single release strategy, but there are pillars that I think every artist should at least consider.
I think that's really well said, and I agree with you. And I think that's kind of important as you listen to this. This is a single release strategy. Pillars is a really good word. I don't think that you'll sit here and listen to this episode and walk away with like, here is A, B, and C that I should do, because we're going to kind of just talk around what works, what doesn't work, what some options are. And so it's not going to be just like top to bottom, here's exactly what I do. It'll be more of like, well, they went through A, B, C, D, and E, and B and C make sense for me, so let me do those things. And so I think that's a really important thing in terms of how you approach listening to this episode so that you actually get something out of it.
Yeah, 100%. I totally agree. And I think just to kind of run down very, very high level here, some of the things that I think about when it comes to planning a single release strategy is I look at a few different pillars. One is like the timeline, looking at that as like the first layer of the umbrella, so to speak. And then I look at what's going to fit into that timeline, where things are going to happen, and how do you excite fans at different levels of intimacy or involvement with your brand as an artist or a band. And then I think about the content that I'm going to create and the narrative around that content, and then bribes, how you're going to get fans interacting, and what kind of bribes are good to be using for singles and what are kind of suboptimal, and then what you can be doing post-release to really drive continued engagement and bringing in new audiences. So those are kind of like very, very high level here, the big pillars that I think we're going to cover in this episode. And I think that they're the kind of the big important ones to consider as part of your music marketing arsenal. When it comes to a timeline, maybe you and I differ a little bit on this. I'm actually not sure, Ed, but what do you think is generally a good timeline to consider when it comes to the marketing of a single?
I think typically, like, if you're looking at when you should tell people that new music's coming, to me, 4 to 6 weeks is enough time to come out and say like, hey, the song's coming out, right? So like, if I'm looking at my timeline, 4, 5, 6 weeks out, I would come out and say, hey, we have a new song coming out, and just start teasing that idea. You don't have to come out and say the title, you don't have to, whatever. Just kind of start teasing the fact that new music's coming out. 5, 6 weeks out. 4 weeks out, I'm typically thinking like, okay, now is where we do the official announce of the song. It's a month away. The song's coming out. let's start posting some pictures or audio clips and start getting people involved with the fact that there's a song that's coming out. Kind of just stay on that path for the next week or two until we're 2.5 weeks out from the actual release of the single. And then 2.5 weeks out, that's when I'll start to kind of put out the bribes that Jack was mentioning that we'll kind of dive into and start to give people more behind the scenes access. And then obviously as you get to like the week of, you start posting like the songs out Friday, blah, blah, blah. And then post release, I feel like it's cool to have some kind of video content to drop to kind of keep the story going around it. So like high picture, that's kind of how I approach it.
That's honestly how I approach it as well. I think like 6 weeks, and we were talking about this today with the team actually. The whole IndieX agency team had a meeting specifically talking about single releases. So this is interesting timing that we're recording this episode. But one of the things that we were talking about is like, from a timeline perspective, going as far out as 6 weeks gives you the ability to say to yourself, okay, I'm 6 weeks out from this release. What do I still need to be doing? Is the song done? Is the content done? Did I get the final masters back? Am I working on video, or is the video in post? Any video content doesn't necessarily have to be a music video, but like any video content that you might be creating, any graphic content, kind of taking stock of where you're at. I think that kind of 6 week kind of back planning is really useful to allow yourself to see what your needs might be and what walls you might run up against if you don't get your shit in order, so to speak. You'll run out of time really quickly. So I think allowing yourself to work that far back then allows you to slate in, like you were saying, Ed, like where does certain type of content start to be talked about, start to be released? When do you start teasing things out? When do you start being a little more obvious and explicit about what's going to be coming out? When might you tease behind the scenes content? When does a bribe drop? You can't do any of that without planning far in advance, So yeah, I agree with you. I think that that's a really good sort of framework to work within, and, not forcing yourself to rush or be kind of hurried through a content creation process that might then end up being kind of mediocre.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think maybe the one thing that people listening might think is like, well, what about these artists that tease a song for 3 months, 6 months? Like I saw someone the other day online that's like a clip of this song went viral in, I want to say like December 2020, and now they're just releasing it. And I think my comment to that would be like, a lot of times that feels like an ineffective, unless there's like some huge virality around this song, feels like it's just a weird kind of angle to say, hey, here's a song and in a year you can have it. Like, I guess I understand like wanting to build hype and that kind of stuff, but to me it's like, if you have a fan base, which probably a lot of people listening do as an independent musician, if you have a fan base that is interested in engaging with you and hearing from you and being a part of what you're doing, it feels like putting a song out when it's ready with 6 weeks lead time is a much better approach than posting on TikTok for 6 months and hoping something catches on. Like that's just kind of in my sense. And not that you won't post on TikTok with this, but just kind of to address the idea that like, do we need to do 6 months of, if I get 10,000 pre-saves, the song will come out eventually. Like, do we need to do that? I think you don't need to necessarily.
Yeah, and so much of that is kind of orchestrated, So I agree with you. And on the other end of the spectrum of that, I actually think these are really good narratives to address. On the other end of that, I think a lot of artists watch how artists with massive fan bases just tease a song for one day and then drop it the next day. Although I think that's gone out of fashion a little bit, but it still happens with albums for sure. And I think it still happens with singles. That's kind of on the other end of the spectrum, and worth talking about here, that you can't really play at that level if you're still growing a fan base. Now, I would argue that even if you do have a massive fan base, you're missing out on a lot of opportunities to nurture those fans and make each release something exciting for them if you're just kind of spitting it out there and not caring too much. So yeah, like I would argue that in this direction as well, like, you should plan a little further out and actually have, some supporting content and some supporting marketing plans for your singles more than just, an overnight sort of secret drop.
Yeah, I feel like that one of the coolest things that I've seen, like, first of all, what you said, like, a lot of these very creative, like, immediate drop strategies are for people that have massive fan base, so not recommended. And we're talking, like, not even massive fan bases, but like cult fan bases, like, the Taylor Swifts of the world. It's probably a handful of artists that can get away with that and not have it tank. But even Taylor Swift doesn't really do that. I mean, she might release like a track as a surprise, but she's not putting out an album or anything like that. And it's tracks that have already been, that she's re-recording. So, but what I was going to say was, I think one of the coolest things I've seen from an artist, I think a while back, Bon Iver put an album out and he staggered it so that I think if you signed up, you got access to it or something like that. But then, like, it was only for people on his list or something. Like, he didn't publicize that this album was coming. I can't remember exactly, but he essentially gave like secret access to certain parts of it to his email list. And then on the day of release, everybody, like his big fans, had already heard this. And on the day of release, he put it on Spotify, and it was like every hour a song drop from like 8 a.m. to 8 p.m.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool.
It was like public facing. It was this idea of, oh my God, he's releasing a thing. But then you had all of his like core fans online hyping it up about like, this is awesome. The next track is off. Like, like it creates this whole whirlwind, which was really cool. So even that wasn't just what it appeared, where it was like song. It was like you said, it was premeditated. It had some legs to it. It had some groundwork and behind the scenes work to it. And I think that's the thing that's really important to stress, that we're kind of getting at, is like, put thought into what you're doing and make it cool to your fans, because that's who's interested in what's coming out. Like, don't, sell your fans short just for a shot at, oh, well, there's no releases on this Friday, so I'm just going to push the song out next Friday and maybe I'll get on a playlist.
Right. Yeah.
Those big swings never tend to really connect.
Yeah. I think this is an interesting sort of way to transition into talking about content and narrative that your single releases have built around them, or built to, content that's built to support the release, and what kind of narratives you can take with that. Because making something cool for your fans can be a huge part of the content that you put together. For one, like, certainly teaser content, like you were saying, like letting fans know that a song is going to be coming out, maybe giving away or putting out content that sort of teases out some of the lyrics little by little. And you can do that in a number of ways, certainly with video content, certainly with, image graphic content. That kind of stuff is all sort of, I think, well-worn territory, hopefully. But the narrative that you can put around that sort of stuff can be really interesting. For one example, like, you can make a single release sort of like a call to arms for your fans to be like, hey, like, I'm trying to reach this milestone. And I'm not necessarily saying like the 1,000 pre-saves thing that you often see done on TikTok, and it seems kind of gimmicky. But, there is something to that of like, if you have an existing base of people that are going to be excited about something, you can create content that leans into that a little bit. And, so for example, like one of our clients at IndieX, we were working with them to create content that around a single drop that they were doing, that was trying to get their fans to help them chart in New Zealand, because they're a New Zealand based band. They have a lot of fans in New Zealand, and that was really that was kind of a goal that they had, granted, like a little bit of a vanity metric, but all good. Like, it was something that their fans could hang their hat on and be like, oh, we can help our artist do this. And that's the kind of narrative that you can weave in a lot of ways when you've got passionate people that are into what you're doing. But it doesn't have to be a challenge either. You can do this with lyrics. You can tease out content or give the meaning behind the song in a lot of ways. That could look like behind the scenes content of you just talking about the song and talking about what it means to you, why you wrote it, how you wrote it, what state of mind you were in, what it was like recording it. And this is all stuff that you can do and have, little snippets of the song playing in the background with it. So you're kind of giving a little bit of a sneak peek, early access, but also a deeper step into what the song is all about.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. And that's something that we used for our most recent single was like behind the scenes kind of access to the demo track, which I think we'll kind of dive into in a second. But I wanted to just say, like, circle back to what you said about goals. And sure, maybe 1,000 pre-saves or charting on whatever is a little bit of a kind of, I can't think of the right word, unimportant goal. But it's also kind of like, if you're putting a single out, it's like, what are your expectations for a single? And I think that's really important, because while that might not be a super important goal in terms of actually building your email list or your ecosystem, I think there's something to be said for that being a goal of like, hey, credibility building, right? Like, it's almost this intangible thing. So I think what I'm saying is, when I said it's not like a important goal, it's not going to get you on that chart. It's not going to build your email list or give you all this notoriety or whatever. But it is a really cool thing to be like, hey guys, this song's coming out. It's been a goal of ours to get on this chart forever. And we really want to just like see if we can do it with your help. You're not going after the chart at that point. I mean, you are, but you're really going after the relationship with your fans. And that's what makes singles, I think, successful, is when you're doing this, when you're making it like a community centric thing. So I think that's a really good point you had, because that what I'm saying is, like, around our single for the 502s most recently, we did essentially it was an album launch opt-in, but with very little ads. I can't remember if we ran ads, but it was all just to our fans, like, hey, we have a new single coming out. It's the first song since Just a Little While, and we want to give you guys all this free content, and we want to give you the demo and behind the scenes. And so that turned into this thing where people were excited, because it was this little mini event, and we did a listening party, and it took on this narrative of first song since all the virality, and they're going to go live with us at midnight, and they're letting us hear the demo. And we didn't have a goal of like, hey, can we get on a chart or whatever, but we did have a goal of like, we'll dive into this metric in a second, but can we get 2,000 pre-saves on the song? And can we get 100 people to join the live stream, that kind of thing? And so we had these internal goals, but we really made it more about the community, which I think ultimately always will drive your results higher. The more you focus on the community and providing value, the more likely you are to get more streams or more pre-saves or more track purchases if you're going after charts or whatever it is.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a really good point. And I want to get into that in a second, because like there's different levels of the community, right? There's different levels of your fan base. But I think you said it well, like in terms of the stuff that you could have in your content arsenal around a single release, it could be, the demo. It could be an acoustic version of the song. It could be early access to the track in and of itself. And I know some artists are afraid to do that kind of thing. But I promise you, like if you do give certain subsets of your fan base early access, they're going to stream it anyway. When it comes out and you let them know, they're going to listen to it. But argue with me all you want on that. But I think that that's the truth. That's another thing. Countdowns, though, that's something else. Giving away snippets of the lyrics, like I was saying, giving away the single art, letting that kind of stuff drive your content ahead of a release can be really cool. Even something as simple as like, kind of teasing out the title could be cool. I mean, something that comes to my mind is like, this is silly, and I've never seen anybody do this. I don't think I've ever seen anybody do this, but like, imagine if you teased out like different titles around a release for like a week, and like every day you dropped a title that you were like, we might call the song X, and give a snippet. And there was a video to go along with each of those with like, I don't know, 3 seconds of the song. And then on like the 7th day, you actually revealed what the title was going to be. Like, that's the kind of stuff that just gets people a little bit engaged. And it's like, oh, what kind of wacky shit are they going to come up with next? That's just an easy example of something creative that you could do to get your fans a little bit more engaged. Now, talking about like different levels of fandom and like the level of intimacy or relationship that your fans have, like you've got people that are orbiting around and they're maybe are more casual listeners and they like you, but they're not a customer yet. Maybe they're not even on your email or text list. The way that you market a single ahead of a release to those people versus the ones that are on your list and are communicating with you regularly, or people that are already customers and that have bought from you, or people that come to shows, or people that are your membership, your membership members if you've got Patreon or something like that. The way that you might tease a single to them and let them in on that part of your world can be and probably should be different.
Yeah. I think that's really important because the way I think about it is like there's pretty much 3 levels of people, or maybe like 2 levels and a go-between. Like you have your fans on social media who are, I would say, lower engagement. Like they're less
earlier.
Right. Yeah. They're earlier on. Like they're less invested in what you're doing. And then you have your email subscribers who are opening everything. Like those are your hardcore fans. And then you have the people on social media as you start to post about the song that go from social media to email, and then they start getting all the content. And so I think it's important to keep those 3 things in mind. But really what you want to be doing, like you're kind of saying, Jack, is like you want to almost put like the surface level teaser type stuff on social media and like the real meat in the emails. Just kind of as like a maybe semi-actionable way to think about this. I kind of always structure it as like announce the song, release the cover artwork, do some behind the scenes stuff, post some clips of the audio, 1 week to go to the song's out. Like that's what my big picture string of ideas look like on social media leading up to the track. This is starting, the 4 weeks out or whatever we were talking about. That's about as deep as I get on there. Plus I'll add in like, if you want to hear the demo or, hey, we have this cool bribe, come join the email list. I'm not like spilling my guts on social media because I don't think a lot of people on there care. They want to know that the song's happening. They want to see a couple things about it. They want to know it exists and they want to have some insight. Like I'm adding color to the captions on these things, but I'm not posting the behind the scenes making of the song, diary entry kind of thing. I leave that for people on there. And if you're posting on socials about like, hey, the song's coming, if you want to know more or hear the demo or see behind the scenes or get the lyrics before it's out, click here or click the link in my bio. That's kind of the strategy I would recommend because then you're getting people to come to your email list. Then they're getting all these emails leading up to the single. And at the same time, now they're on your list for the future. So I dig that from a social media strategy. And then running alongside that is the email strategy to people on your list, which really kind of mimics socials until they join the workflow to be notified for the single. But like offering this bribe to people via email in a very authentic way kind of mimics the social media messages. And then ultimately at the end of it, when people sign up to be notified for the single or they pre-save or they opt into your bribe, that's where they can start getting more specific reminders around songs coming out, the song's out, that kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. I think something worth talking about kind of as we start to wade into the waters of bribes is like heading into a release season or a new release, if it's a single, there's a lot of creative ways that you can work to get people on your email list and, bring them a bit deeper. Obviously, early access is a very easy one, especially if you have fans that are excited and, they voraciously want early access of your music. I think even cooler, though, is the opportunity to give fans something that they otherwise would not get. And what you guys did with the most recent release of Hey Julia, and what we've done with a lot of artists that we work with at IndieX, is allow fans some kind of early access to something adjacent to the single or related to the single, like you guys did with the demo or an acoustic version of the single, or really like having a content page built out with a lot of single related elements, whether it be demos, whether it be an acoustic version, whether it be more of that sort of deeper content around the themes of the single, the lyrics, really any of that stuff, even some stuff that you might consider for social, but you just withhold a few specifically for, this kind of deeper access. That can work really, really well to drive engagement ahead of a single and get people pumped up. Another thing that I think can work really well is inclusive in that is doing a kind of like a listening party at midnight when the song drops, go live with your fans and hang out with them, listen to it together. And that can really, do some pretty cool things for building a tribe and also get people listening on the platforms that you want them to listen on. So these are all ways that you can kind of work to get people to take a bit of a deeper step with you if they haven't already done so. And again, like, you can engage your existing list this way, you can engage your customers this way, gives you some ammunition to take people a bit deeper. And well, before I dive into what I'm going to say next, what insights do you guys have, Ed, from what we recently did with Hey Julia? Because we kind of pretty much everything I just said, like, we threw the kitchen sink at it in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and I think the biggest lesson that I took away from that was, like, we didn't really premeditate this. We're coming here, and I said at the start of the episode, you get the most out of this if you listen and you kind of pick up on the pieces that we're outlining for you around, like, hey, there's a bribe. Hey, here's like a 6-week kind of rollout strategy. Like, know these things. But when we started with Hey Julia, we started teasing it on TikTok and Instagram stories. And then it got a little slightly positive reaction. And we're like, okay, cool. And we were just kind of posting TikToks and Instagrams and posting the cover on Instagram feed and just mentioning that the song was coming. And then it was like, hey, we were using pre-saves as a metric to see how are people interested in this. And not even like as a metric of importance, but more of like, that was the only metric we had was, hey, the song's coming. If you want to pre-save it, it's in the bio, that kind of thing. And I was like, oh, wow, this is like got 1,000 pre-saves just from us posting random videos and stuff. People seem to be interested. And so it was a very organic approach to it where it was like, well, okay, well, what do we do to give them more content? And it was like, well, if they're interested in the song, we should give them the demo version. So we put the demo version and we said, hey, if you want the demo of this track, we're not going to give you the official audio, but if you want to hear it now, 3 weeks or 2 weeks before the song comes out, here you go. It's your music as much as it's our music, and we're excited. You guys are excited, so listen here. And so what was really cool and what I think I'm trying to say when it's like, hey, listen to this and then create your strategy, but also be flexible. It was like, we knew we wanted to tease it. We knew we wanted to get people to the list somehow. We know we wanted to put the song out, but we didn't know the specifics. We let the comments and interactions with our fans and the DMs and emails around the initial teases impact the wording. Because like I'm saying, it was very fluid to say, teased it. All right, you want it? Who are we to say no? Here's the song, get the demo, join the email list. And alongside that, there was the listening party, like you said, there was the lyrics, there was a little 3-minute snippet around like, here's how we picked the name Julia for the song, right? Studio things, pictures. And it was all very organic leading up to the release. And then night of at midnight, we did a live stream and we emailed everybody who had RSVP'd or pre-saved it and said, hey, we're live now, and so those are pieces that we implemented that you guys can listen to about and kind of take away. It's like, do you want to do the TikTok and Instagram story teases? Do you want to post some behind the scenes photos on Instagram? Do you want to be emailing your list a month out and tell them a new song's coming? And then 2 weeks out, offer them access to the demo version if they sign up here. Do you want to do that on TikTok? Do you want to put that in the link in your bio? You want to post that on your Instagram story? Maybe rewind that and kind of listen, but those are all options specifically right there. Those are all options that are in the tool bag, so to speak, that we didn't know when we were necessarily going to deploy them, but we knew we would at some point between the announce and the single. And we just did it as it felt natural. So as you get more comfortable, you can be a little bit more flexible and say like, oh, let's pull this lever now, or let's pull that lever. If you're not as comfortable yet, take those ideas and plot them out.
I think something that you said is particularly important when it comes to like content narrative, right? We were talking about like the different ways you can talk about a song and the different kind of levers that you can pull on related to that. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be all goal or challenge driven. It can also be about the song itself and the lyrics, like you guys did with here's how we picked the name Julia. You also leaned in on, the idea of your fan base being a family and saying like, it's just as much our music as it is yours. These are all like, I think, really interesting and creative ways to drive a narrative ahead of a release and tailor your content to that, which is really good. And then, yeah, like you said, like really all of these are pillars or pieces that you can take and build into a strategy that fits you and fits the timeline that you decide upon. Where your content goes, what you decide is valuable enough for being part of a bribe versus what lives on social, what narratives you want to spin on social versus what you want to have in email, what level of access you want to give to your fans ahead of time, early, whether it's the whole song, whether it's a demo, whether it's, ancillary content, whatever that might be. Those are all kind of like the pieces that we're kind of unpacking here that are the pillars that kind of build the building. Something I want to dive into a little bit more is the concept of pre-saves, because I know a lot of artists, they see other artists running pre-saves around single releases and launches, and they wonder, like, how can I do that? Is it worth it? I mean, we've covered on this show, and I've kind of dug my heels in to say what I feel about pre-saves, in that, whether they're algorithmically beneficial, they're not. Spotify doesn't even recognize pre-saves. It's not a thing in Spotify. In fact, like, if you got a lot of pre-saves and then nobody streams your song when it comes out, that could probably actually be detrimental to you. However, I wanted to touch on this since we were, doing some experimentation with pre-saving with you guys in how we presented it to fans. And I think the one big thing that I want to kind of put out there in this episode is, like, in addition to, we could argue back and forth about the tech behind pre-saves, and, I'm sure there are detractors who would disagree with me and say, like, oh, well, you're wrong. Like, pre-saves do something, and I've seen playlists pop off and all that stuff. Fine. If you want to argue that point, fine. However, what I think we all can agree upon is that pre-saves are valueless to fans. Absolutely valueless. It doesn't do anything for them as a fan. It's a purely selfish act, in my opinion. It should never be the main ask of what you're trying to do. And I think we did a good job of planting the pre-save as something, an extra step that needed to be taken in order to get the thing that your fans wanted. So I wanted to unpack that a little bit.
Dude, absolutely. It's a very blunt way to say it, but it's also like,
I wanted to be very clear about how I feel about this.
But like, the idea that pre-saves are valueless to fans, that provides no value. Like, they get nothing from pre-saving the song. And so what was really interesting when we did our single is essentially, like, when we were posting TikToks and that kind of stuff, the link to the song was in the bio, but we weren't asking anybody to pre-save it. They were just listening and then going and being like, yeah, okay, I'll pre-save it. It's cool, right? They were doing it of their own action. When we then went, the next step was, well, let's ask them to pre-save and see what happens. When we posted, hey, pre-save the song, not very many people did.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So when we specifically asked people to pre-save the song, nowhere near as many people as I thought would, given our email list size and our text list size and whatever. Like, it was maybe a fifth of what I thought it would be from asking.
Do you think it's because that ask, like, is very apparent to fans that, like, they're like, well, why would I want to do this? What good does this do me?
I think so. And the reason I think that is because then 2 weeks later, when we offered them the access to the demo, and we're like, hey, well, you guys are liking the song, but you didn't pre-save, whatever. Here's the demo if you want it. When we did that, and on the thank you page of that, like you were alluding to, on the thank you page after you, it was an opt-in form that took you to a thank you page where it said, step 2 is to pre-save the song and you'll unlock this demo version, which was then delivered via email. When we presented it that way, it was like a huge spike. I think we got like 1,500, 2,000. We got like 10 times the pre-saves that day, and it went to the same audience. And so it was like, oh, all right. So people don't actually care about pre-saving. It's like, sure, a handful of people will do it because you say it's doing me something, but they're actually way more inclined. This is a one instance sample size as well, but so it seems like they're more inclined to do it when, surprise, you provide value. And then it's just kind of a light ask on the back end. And I thought that was really interesting because I think it speaks to the fact that, like, much like the fan finder is really powerful because of the indirect introduction idea, seems like this kind of ask where it's not providing fans any value follows the same mindset where, like, you're better off to lead with something of value, something cool that they want, and just trickle in the thank you page or the PS of the email, wherever, to pre-save the song if they're feeling it. That was the language we used. It was like, if you want to do it, if not, cool. This is step 2, but also there's no pressure. And that seemed to work better. So I thought that was something that's worth mentioning, is like, don't lead with pre-saving. If you want to drive them, use it as like a second step or something like that.
Yeah, totally. I think that that's really well said. Like, always lead with value. And I think we harp on that a lot on this show in kind of all senses of music marketing. Like, you always want to be trying to over deliver on value for your fans, and no matter what it is you're offering them, and trying to get them engaged with your single is no different. And yeah, so for anybody who absolutely must, feels like they must do pre-saves and they must get them, my recommendation for you then is exactly like Ed was saying, is offer your fans something valuable that they would want. Make the pre-save a second step of that. Here's your next step, or you are not done yet, but wait, here's your next step. Complete your form, finish the survey here, insert headline, whatever you think fits your brand. These are all just ideas that you could use. Use that as the back end. Not only will you probably get more people doing it because they understand that they're getting something in exchange for what you're asking them to do, but also you'll probably get people that are more likely to actually go listen when the song drops. And I think that that's especially important because, again, like I said, if you get a whole bunch of saves right when your song drops and then nobody listens, like, that's probably algorithmically detrimental as opposed to beneficial. So something to think about there for sure. And I'm excited that we got to touch on this because I don't think we've talked about pre-saves in quite some time. So it's always worth picking that scab a little bit.
You know what's really interesting to me is, like, just kind of piggybacking off that. This is my last thought on it, but it's like, we don't talk about pre-saves, but pre-saves are, like you said, it's something the artist wants. And I think a lot of times it's like, well, I want this, therefore I'm going to ask for it. I think when it comes to your relationship with fans, the idea of asking for things is a really bad idea. Anytime ever that we've just bluntly asked for something that doesn't provide anything to our supporters, it doesn't go well, or it does, a fraction of what it could. And so just because you want something, I would challenge you guys, or not challenge, but encourage you to say, okay, I want this thing that doesn't do anything for my fans. How do I make it something that's going to give them value and I still can get what I want? And that sounds very like conniving, but it's really not. It's more meant to sound like, how does everybody win in this situation?
Yes. How do you make win-win asks to your fans? I couldn't agree with you more. Like, every ask that you make to your fans in any context, whether it's social, whether it's email, whether it's sales, every ask that you make should be an offer that's so valuable to them that whatever you're asking, it would be stupid for them to say no.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, like, I agree. And it's just wild because when you build your fan base off of the that win-win idea, people are way more receptive to stuff and to do things for you because they know you're not just like fleecing them for a click of a button. It's like, well, no, they're giving me A, B, C, D, and E. The least I can do is pre-save the song versus I don't have time for that.
And realistically, I think the cool thing about this is if you're positioning your offers this way, where it's part of a sign up for an offer, the pre-save is going to be a secondary thought. It's just an extra step in the process, and it's not the thing they're doing. So when they sign up and they get the thing that you are offering to them, the behind the scenes content, the early access, the demo, the acoustic version, whatever it is, as soon as they get that, all the excitement is right there, and they're getting it directly from you in an email or a text. And then it's like, oh man, I'm so excited. Like, I'm hearing from one of my favorite artists. I'm hearing from one of my favorite bands. I'm directly in communication with them. And that's so much more beneficial to the fan experience and valuable in the long term, I think, than just a static sign up on a pre-saved landing page. And I think that can go miles for, where you can take your fans in the future and how you can continue to nurture them.
Dude, absolutely agreed. You're going for this one specific action around this one specific single, right? But like you said, you're creating this relationship so you're not starting from zero every time. If you're just driving people to a pre-save button, I don't know if you see those emails ever. I'm not 100% sure. I don't know that I ever saw the ones from Spotify. I don't think they give them to you. So it's like you are doing this thing where it's like, all right, say you got 6 singles coming out. And the first one, you get 100 pre-saves from 100 people. Well, now going into the next single, you've got 100 people that if they're on your email list are likely to check the song out or listen to it or pre-save it for you. And then you can try to build on that. And so it becomes this process of like, the idea in my mind behind releasing singles on a continuing basis as like a single strategy is that you're building slowly each release. And this really kind of plays into that very, very well. The last thing I wanted to just add really quickly is that we've talked a lot about how do you provide value? How do you provide value for a single release, and what kind of stuff can you give your fans and your supporters? And we kind of were using the 502s as a reference point in the sense that we were like, hey, here's this multi-step opt-in form. And then once you signed up for that, you got an email and then you got access to a hidden page, right? Like that's a lot. And I get that that's a lot. And for us, we have all these things that exist already. So really for us, it was like duplicate a page and swap the content. It wasn't from scratch. If you're listening to this and you're like, oh my gosh, I've never done an album launch. I don't know, like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. You can also just do this via email. Like literally the bare bones of what you need is some kind of opt-in form that goes to your list. And then you can deliver the content via email. You can deliver it via a Google Drive link. Like would be totally acceptable to say, hey, my new song's coming, get the demo and the lyrics now. And instead of a page, when they sign up, they get an email that's like, thank you so much for this. I'm so pumped for the song. Like, here you go. Links out to a public Google Drive folder with the lyrics and an MP3 in there. Like, that's perfectly acceptable to present the offer that way if you're not comfortable with building pages or any of that kind of stuff. Like, I guess I'm saying, like, don't let the fact that what we were talking about is very in-depth prolong or shy you away from doing that, because you can do it in a different way and still get people excited about it.
Totally. I agree. Like done is better than perfect in this case. Cause really like it's the experience of the fan and the thing that you're offering that really matters. It's less about like the medium that you offer it on. I totally agree. The last pillar of this process, the strategy behind releasing singles and the things you should be thinking about is like, what are you doing post-release? Obviously, you're letting your fans know that the music is out there. And ideally, really, what you want to be focused on is like, you should have a video. In my opinion, you should have a performance video of the song ready to go and ready to start running traffic on pretty much right away. And I think that that's kind of a critical piece of this. I don't personally believe in waiting for the music video to drop a few weeks. And when I say music video, I'm specifically talking about a performance video that you can start running traffic on. I think that that's pretty crucial to have within a few days of the track being out there so that you can start paying for ads on it and paying for new people to see it and making sure that all of your existing fans know that it's out there and just continuing to drive that. So that's a simple one and kind of goes without saying in my opinion, but maybe not. I think it's a really important part and a really important pillar of any single release is to have that in place.
Yeah. I think the one thing where I agree and maybe slightly disagree is with you is that like on that video, I think it's actually kind of cool to have the video ready. I mean, this is what we're doing right now, right? Like the video's ready, and on release day, we kicked on ads on Instagram Reels and let it run through the weekend. But like those ads started day one to start driving traffic to it. The video's not out yet, like the video.
That's fair. That's fair.
So it's like, I guess I'm saying like, it's a cool thing to have. I think you need the video, like Jack said. If you want to prolong it a little bit, start the traffic on day one, and then a week later, drop the video or a week and a half. Like that's okay too, I think. It's just like, you need the video because the only way you're going to drive people to this new track that aren't already on your email list or social media are via these videos and running paid traffic to them. Like that's it. That's the only way, short of some miracle, something going viral. It's like That's the only way you're getting people there. So get that performance video, have it ready to go on day one, and start those Instagram Reels ads up at the budget you can afford.
That's well said, dude. I agree. Like, you don't necessarily have to drop the entire video in its full length. I agree with you. What I was trying to say was exactly that. Like, you need to have that video as an advertising asset, and you should start using that right away.
Agreed.
That's a really good point worth mentioning there, and a good clarification. And if you want to learn more about, we only briefly touched on running traffic. If you want to learn more about running ads on Instagram Reels, I'll link to an episode that we talk specifically all about that strategy. We'll link to that in the show notes. And you can also check out the fan finder method on how to get new fans every single day. That's inside of Indie Pro. So you can check out that as well. But I hope you guys dug this little rundown on the pillars of releasing a single and the things that you should be thinking about when it comes to dropping music in a recurring fashion to build up your listener base and to keep yourself active. I think that these are really the big things that every artist should be paying attention to, regardless of their size, timeline, bribes, content, narrative, what's going into your arsenal. All of those things are really, really important. And they kind of make up, I think, the pieces of a successful single release.
Well said.
Well, thank you guys so much for listening. If you dig content like this and you're enjoying the show, please leave us a review and make sure you're subscribed. We'd love to hear from you guys and let us know what you think about the show. And we will catch you guys next time on Creative Juice. Peace out, Indies.
Can y'all really feel the East Coast, feel the West Coast, feel